Hello, Lapeer community. Just want to come to you today with a brief COVID update. Obviously, lots of information swirling around various news organizations and how county governments and school districts are handling the response to COVID. Wanted to discuss with you today what Lapeer County and more specifically Lapeer Community Schools is doing to address these issues. From a school district perspective, as of today, since October 5th, when we re-engaged our students and staff in a face-to-face environment, we have a total number of cases, positive cases of COVID of 32 in our 9 buildings. That has resulted in the effective quarantine of over 500 people. And it's really important, I think, to understand that while that seems like a very large number, the quarantining is done specifically to limit the spread in schools. What we're learning, and I just was on a phone call this morning with the other county superintendents, district leaders, and the health department, is that in our experience with COVID is very similar to what's happening around the county, is that school districts are not vectors of transmission, meaning we're not seeing school district buildings as super spreaders of COVID, and that most cases are coming in from outside and impacting our student population. That's good news, right? Because I think some of the initial fear of returning to face-to-face instruction, that with that many people in close proximity, staff and students, there'd be lots of transmission happening, and the evidence simply does not bear that out. What we're also learning from our investigation of these individual cases is that most of them are relatively preventable. Meaning if we keep our children home when they are demonstrating symptoms of COVID prior to them testing positive, that can have a really good impact on limiting the number of students we have to quarantine. So if your son or daughter feels ill and you keep them home and you schedule a COVID test, and let's say that doesn't happen for 2 or 3 days, but they've been at home and they test positive, the previous 48 hours when they begin experiencing symptoms is really important to the investigation. And if they weren't in school, it means that we don't have to necessarily quarantine anyone that the student was in proximity to, because we're a safe distance of time away from when they were last exposed to other students and staff. So keeping your children home for those few days while they're experiencing symptoms is really, really important. We are, as a county, I can speak for the county because we just, as I said, spoke this morning, are committed to maintaining face-to-face instruction. And as logistically difficult as it is to deal with the quarantining process, I mean, our average right now is for every positive case, we're quarantining an average of about 30 people. That's a major impact. And when you're separating folks from the learning environment, there's obvious gaps that happen instructionally and academically for our students, and it's difficult to maintain that. But we're committed to face-to-face instruction regardless of some of the logistic burdens. And our staff is working very hard for our quarantined students to ensure that we're maintaining a connection to school. We understand your frustration that in some cases there are gaps and hiccups in that connection, but understand that your teachers and support staff are working to provide the same level of service to the students in a face-to-face environment, and then equally committed to trying to make sure that the students on quarantine are getting the types of access they need. And we understand that doesn't happen in every single case, and we're working on our end to make sure that we improve in that regard. But understand a majority of our teachers and a majority of our staff is very committed to making sure that we stay in a face-to-face environment. And that requires a commitment from all of us, right? A commitment from our community to make sure that we're keeping students home who don't feel well, that we're being honest and open about COVID exposure to help us limit the number of quarantined students. And our end of the bargain is to make sure that we get better each and every day with maintaining that level of service for students who are separated from school because of a quarantine order. And we think it's just vitally important that we stay in school and give students the opportunity to have that face-to-face interaction with our staff, continue to participate with the necessary health and safety restrictions in place in their after-school and extracurricular activities, like athletics, for example, because those things are very important to our students. We in Lapeer understand that as the rest of the county returned to face-to-face instruction in September, we were in a virtual setting for a little over a month until October 5th when we returned. And I distinctly recall talking to many students, many parents, many community members, staff included, who were urging Lapeer schools to get back to face-to-face instruction. It's incumbent upon us to meet the health and safety standards as set forth by the local health department. In the same manner, it's important for us to comply with all manner of codes and standards that we are required to meet. One example I've given in talking to our staff is a fire code, right? We are required to have a set number of evacuation drills each year, to have the appropriate monitoring stations, water suppression systems, fire retardant materials in our buildings to ensure that our students are safe. We can't arbitrarily decide which codes and which standards we follow as a public institution. So for the foreseeable future, especially as we are on the brink of the cold and flu season, we don't see these standards going away. So far, our interaction with our parent community has been really positive. People have been very understanding about the COVID requirements to quarantine and helping us maintain some distancing and the masking requirements and the hand washing. I just want to say thank you for the large majority of our population who is complying with that. Whether or not we agree with all these standards really is inconsequential. These are the standards. We want to be face-to-face, and we're going to continue to meet those standards. We also understand that we have to strike a balance between student and staff, health and safety, with the academic impact that all of this has, right? There are more than one or two variables at play here. And that's really important for us to remember. It's not a 1 + 1 = 2 type equation. There are many factors that contribute to our decision. We basically speak with the health department on a daily basis to continue to update how our organization is doing as it relates to COVID, in addition to where do we fit inside of the COVID activity from a county perspective. I'm speaking with district leaders on a weekly basis about how they're handling and dealing with all these issues. This has put a tremendous amount of stress on our staff from two different perspectives. Number one, the increased workload to make sure that we keep kids connected no matter what environment they're in. And second to that is the number of staff that have had to be quarantined because of exposure to COVID means that it's a stress in our substitute employee pool, which is already pretty shallow. There's not a large number of people in any position, whether it's being a bus driver, a paraprofessional, a secretary, or teacher. That was a problem in previous years. It's even more amplified now because of the COVID pandemic. So there are some service-related issues that you're probably going to be experiencing. For example, we had 4 food service workers out a few weeks ago at our high school, and we had to have folks at central office go over and help distribute food. And we're willing to do that. We want to help out and plug the gaps where they occur. But just understand that we're doing our best to try to keep pace with the stress this is placing on our staff from our ability to staff all these positions. And I can speak for the county and say that we are unified in our commitment to maintaining a face-to-face learning environment for our students. And that's as of today, right? Things are changing quickly. We're obviously seeing statewide a tightening of restrictions that look a lot more like what happened when we were living in the shutdown. And I don't know, just as the leader of one organization, what is coming down the road in terms of restrictions or return possibly to phase 3, which would mean we're required to go back to a virtual setting. As of right now, we have the ability to maintain face-to-face instruction. And I really think that despite some of the logistical challenges and the disruption to some students learning because of quarantining, I still think the benefits outweigh the costs. And we're really committed to staying in school and keeping our kids as active and involved as possible, and just simply asking for your help and support and patience as we work through this. So again, a big thank you to this point, from the beginning of our return to face to now. I've been in every one of our buildings, staff, students, parents complying in large numbers, and a super majority of our folks are doing a great job. Just ask that we continue to maintain our diligence as it relates to all of the requirements that are asked of us, and that you help us out by doing some of those small things that can keep some of the sick kids out of school for those short periods of time to limit the exposure. And we're going to keep plugging away and doing the best we can to make sure our kids and our staff are safe. So thank you very much. Have a great day and a great weekend.